Okay, folks, we'll call to order the meeting of the General Government, Housing, and Economic Development. I never know which order to put those in. At any rate, we will start with our consent agenda. There are several demolition orders, one of which I gather Councilmember Montgomery wants pulled. Is that right? The one that's C2, so we'll pull that for future. The other demolition orders are Old Vineyard Road, 3900 Old Vineyard Road, and 1025 Nancy Lane. Or is there anyone here who wishes to speak to these cases? No. If not, okay. Then may I ask the committee, what is your desire?
Move for approval of the balance of the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, all right. And of the demolition. Because there's no one here to speak to them, or do you want to hear the demolition orders?
You mean for C1?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I thought that since we pulled C2, that the balance of the agenda, everything is accepted.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good, good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move to the general agenda.
Can I ask a question, Madam Chair? C2, are we just holding that one in committee? Is that the idea? Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just want to make sure.
Okay.
Item G1, update responses to questions related to UDO 258 regarding view corridors.
Good afternoon, Chairman Light and members of committee. Just to give you some background, in July of 2015, Council approved a text amendment which added additional highway sections to the list of view corridors in the Unified Development Ordinances. Just to refresh your memory, view corridors are specially designated areas along highways which prohibit the construction of new off-premises signs, which of course are more commonly known as billboards. View corridors are currently established within the city limits along sections of Highway 52, I-40, Business 40, Highway 74, also formerly known as Highway 311, and the proposed Northern Beltway. Just to give you some context visually, this is a map that shows in the black lines are adopted view corridors, and that red line, that's showing that the Forsyth County Commissioners are in the process now of adopting that section within their jurisdiction to complete the Northern Beltway. There were three major questions that the council asked us while we were going over UDO 258, and I'm just going to go through our prepared responses to each of those. So council asked how noise walls proposed on Business 40 as part of the Business 40 redevelopment project would affect existing billboards within these view corridors. Our staff contacted NCDOT, and their staff indicated to us that based on their current designs, no existing billboards would be affected by the noise wall construction. So that issue would not affect us going forward through downtown. The second question council asked is for staff to evaluate the feasibility of designating additional highway sections as view corridors. And the three sections that we heard council express interest in were Business 40 between I-40 and Peters Creek Parkway, Highway 52 between Mock Street and I-40, and also US 52 between I-40 and the southern city limits. We conferred with the city attorney's office, and the city attorney doesn't see any legal issue with adding these corridor sections if the council wishes to do so. However, any addition would require notification of property owners and planning board and city council public hearings, such as the staff undertook and you all undertook for the hearings this summer. And we did some research, and a total of 190 highway business and industrial zoned parcels could be affected in these areas by such an addition, because basically only highway business and industrial zoning are the districts which allow billboards currently. The final question that council had staff research was how proposed North Carolina billboard legislation that was under discussion would have affected our local billboard regulations. What the state was proposing would have allowed existing billboards to be raised to a height up to 50 feet above the top of a noise wall, regardless of limits set forth by local jurisdictions. And this legislation would have also limited a city's ability to prohibit relocation of signs if they were taken down within view corridors. However, the General Assembly is out for session currently, and this bill ultimately remained in a committee and was not voted on during that past legislative session. So none of these regulations will affect us going forward, at least not in the current state. Those were the 3 questions that council asked us to research. I'll be glad to answer any questions if you have them.
Are there any questions?
No additional questions. I think the question in my mind is one of whether or not it's a good time to move forward with considering expansion of the viewport, extension of the viewport. I think that my constituents along Business 40 west of Peter Street Parkway to the city limits would value the protected view corridor there if we established it. And frankly, the question in my mind is whether this is a good time to move forward with the conversation.
Are you suggesting that or asking that based on the work that's going to be going on, or based on it being thumbing our nose at Raleigh?
Well, I wouldn't consider it thumbing noses at Raleigh. It's within our existing authority.
Right now.
And I think it would questions of whether it would be likely to result in or economic interest in this issue area successfully seeking additional legislative amendments that would block what we can legally consider doing under existing law. It's a political question in that regard.
Yes, I would agree with you somewhat, Councilmember Bessie, in that the state legislature has opted not to do anything with this, but I would venture to say that this will probably come back. This is one of those that didn't make it to the top of the pile, but I would venture to say it will make it back because you, as I know, the strong lobbying group of the billboard manufacturers and how much influence they have down there. And any time that we do anything that they see could possibly affect their ability to make money, which is put up billboards just about anywhere, particularly on interstates or anything, they get very nervous. So I would say for right now, we're okay. But my question would be, what would happen, and I think I already know this, what would happen when they go back in this session and this one goes to the top of the list? Because you have to understand, just like when we adopt ordinances and resolutions to improve affordable housing and livable wages and that sort of thing, it got to the state legislature, and I think the only reason they didn't react to it or act to it was because of the timing of the other things that they had moved to the top of the list. I think that one's going to go back, and for right now, city attorney and staff, what do you think would happen going forward, just for the listening audience? I kind of already know.
Just to give a little perspective to the council, the reason that we address this issue and filling the gaps within the downtown area is because we hung our justification on the fact that there's a substantial state and local investment in new highway construction in those areas, and that was our justification for not wanting to add any new billboards. Plus, we already had corridors with just a few Swiss cheese holes, for lack of a better term, in those areas. So certainly, and again, not to put any ideas in the council's mind or anything like that, but as you all stated, there's certainly a chance that anytime you do something locally, there could be an equal reaction at the state level.
If I may, I mean, this has been a perennial issue for a decade or more.
Yeah.
It's not unique to the current General Assembly.
I know.
And the billboard industry has shown no reluctance, even in the absence of any local efforts, to press for eliminating regulations that affect them and demanding additional subsidies. They're not shy. And if we do nothing, I fully expect that they will be back pressing again for all they can get. The operative question in my mind, candidly, is would our seeking additional protections make any difference in that dynamic of how the legislature receives those guaranteed lobbying efforts by the billboard industry? And I frankly don't know. The billboard industry is going to push no matter what we do. They will have some support within whatever legislature is there. That has historically been the case for many sessions. I don't know whether I would conclude that what we do within, existing law is going to have any effect on how that lobbying pressure is received.
Is staff suggesting that we go ahead with what we've already talked about and then consider these extra pieces?
That would make sense from our perspective if the council so directed us to do that. When staff was preparing the proposal again this past summer, we felt that we could hang our hat on the fact that there were substantial road improvements proposed to those areas and tie any limitation of billboards to those improvements. But of course, if council directs us to expand that, we could.
Didn't we already act on those?
We did.
Yes, you've already adopted the portions that
Right.
deal with the rebuilding of Business 40 and the new part of the Eastern Beltway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it would be, it's a question of whether we want to initiate an additional process. The process that was underway has already been concluded.
Okay. So let me have the opinion of the committee. Go ahead or just put this on hold for now?
Let's hold it in committee for a month and consult.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's...
Item G2, update on special event permitting process, continued from the August meeting of the Community Development, Housing, General Government Committee.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman Light, members of the committee. You may remember that back in the August General Government meeting, staff presented information related to the current process requiring a notarized affidavit be included as part of the special event application for review by staff before an event is approved. At that time, some council members had expressed a concern that the notification process should be clarified. In response to that, language has been added to the special event application process document, the special event permit frequently asked questions, and the special event permit application itself. What the language does is that it emphasizes the specific ordinance requirements for the affidavit submitted by the applicant, notifying those residents and businesses affected by the special event. It also specifies that the intended purpose of a preliminary application and its timetable, which is to assist the applicant in meeting the ordinance requirements that the notarized notification affidavit be submitted no fewer than 30 days prior to the event. There was also some concern about the frequency of street closings related to the special events. So moving forward, the closure of the same street more than once per calendar month will require written authorization from either the director or deputy director of the Community and Business Development Department. CBD staff is also currently evaluating the need for possible timetable adjustments or tweaks to the current ordinance. And if that is deemed necessary, we will return to the committee for feedback and with recommendations to amend that process. What also came up as part of the discussion on special event permits was for neighborhood block parties. Neighborhood block parties are not specified or defined in the ordinance, but there are stipulations that allow for certain events that if they are outside of the central business district and do not involve commercial activity, which would be having vendors, food vendors rather, that you would not be required to provide insurance as you are for a typical special event. So again, that's outside the central business district and does not involve commercial services. So that is clarified that typically most neighborhood block parties are going to meet those two requirements. So the insurance policy with the city as an additional insured would not be required for those. There was also some concern about the barricade fee that's $300 for a special event and that may be prohibitive for neighborhood block parties. What we're evaluating now is perhaps having two tiers of events based on the number of barricades required for that event, so that most neighborhood block parties would require probably less than 3 or 4 barricades per event, whereas a typical special event requires a greater number of barricades for the event. So what we are continuing to research is having a $100 barricade fee for any event, including neighborhood block parties that required 3 or 4, a number to be determined, barricades as part of the event, but the typical larger special events would still require the $300 barricade fee as part of the event.
Are there questions?
How did you calculate the $300 and $100 fee?
I believe that Community and Business Development consulted with DOT. That is actually not a permit fee and not a fee for our department.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, the city's Department of Transportation calculated that fee based upon how much the staff and equipment costs associated with providing the barricades and picking them up cost the city over the course of whatever period of time we analyzed it, but that's essentially associated with labor and equipment rental.
And the change from the $50 to the higher fee came when you started saying, well, the recreation and parks barricades are inadequate.
That is correct. Originally, there were sawhorse type barricades being used, and under the manual on uniform traffic control devices and the state statute and the city ordinance, we determined that we really had to use manual on uniform traffic control appropriate devices, which are type 3 barricades to physically close off a road for traffic.
What are those devices? What do they look like?
Those basically have 3 horizontal bars instead of a sawhorse type barricade, which has 1 horizontal bar, and they provide better compliance and a better visual target for vehicles that are approaching the intersection. Also, you typically are going to install 2 of those in order to completely close a roadway at each approach. Mr. Page just reminded me that another difference between when Recreation was doing it and when City DOT provided them is that when Recreation handled it, the individuals would pick up the barricades from the city facility as opposed to us delivering them and erecting them at the site.
And you can't do that. You can't have that as an option with the larger barricades.
Correct. They're bigger than the average person is going to be able to manage. We actually use a specialized trailer to deliver them to the site, and I don't think most people are going to be able to accommodate them even inside a pickup truck.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, ma'am.
I can't remember whether you had a visual of them, but I know which ones you're talking about, the difference in both. And again, as you said, this is not necessarily to tax the citizens. We have to think in terms of safety for the first part. It's the top of the list. And are we compliant to what the state recommends so far as the type of equipment that we're running, partnering or whatever with DOT? As you said, block parties, usually people used to put, some still do, cones. They would have their own personal cones that they would just put out there. But cars don't see cones. They're too low to the ground for the visual. And if you look at the ones that we use downtown for closing off Trade Street, for the arts and other things, you can't help but see them. And if you run into them, you're gonna probably hurt yourself also, because they're not something that you can just pick up and move out of the way individually. Again, the cost of making sure that the equipment gets to the citizens safely and making sure that there's no damage to it, I commend us for taking that on, because if they're renting the equipment and we allow them to pick them up, they could get hurt handling them. They could damage them where then we couldn't use them anymore, and then we got to go buy some more. So I believe in a process. Again, I don't know how many events we have a year that people rent this equipment, but I personally don't see, for me, I support anything that keeps our residents safe in our communities when we are in the streets of Winston-Salem or parks or wherever, to separate them from traffic and the citizen or pedestrian. So I'm okay with this.
Councilmember.
A couple questions. The first one, stepping back to the signatures that will have to come in terms of approval for those that are closed, streets that are closed more than once in the same month.
Mm-hmm.
What is the likelihood, looking at certain places that we know for a fact has many ongoing and established events that take place in the same area, in particular same street space, such as Trade Street or something of that nature? How likely then is it that some of those events would actually get denied, in terms of if somebody came and they want to have the event, but we know these are functions that go on, and part of the issue is in some of those areas where they consistently do those, are we really going to deny something that's because it's been closed that many times? Is that, or are we just putting this on a piece of paper, or are they really going to take a look at that?
I think it certainly will be looked at. One of the event series that immediately comes to mind is the Summer on Trade series, that is on the same block downtown in the Arts District for 8 to 10 consecutive Saturday evenings. That's an event that's been ongoing for many years. We're aware of it. It still would require the approval of the director or deputy director. There may be some new series that are out there that may be new to the neighborhood, that may be new to the residents, that may be new to the businesses there, that an event may be denied. But I think of the known series, I don't think there are any immediate red flags for the known series that affect the same area, the same streets more than once a month.
Councilman Montgomery, I would just add, yes, we have denied some permits, and if this passes, and that were to be the case, yes, we would deny them.
Okay. The other question is in reference to the insurance question on the some of the neighborhood things that wouldn't cross that threshold. Would that also be in place if they had like the showmobile or something like that? They still wouldn't have to have the insurance?
What's a show?
The outdoor stage.
Oh,
They wouldn't?
Yes, I'm sorry, a showmobile, I'm not familiar with that.
The stage. Don't they call it showmobile?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's
I was,
You're right.
okay. You're right.
It's a showmobile, and no, that wouldn't be required.
So they still wouldn't require that. The only reason I would say in terms of if they have something like that, there may be a need for some type of insurance presence because that's a
climbing up on
I
it.
know.
you know, if that cuts loose, I don't know who's going to be at fault for it.
I know he answered the question, but I would hold that answer in abeyance because I think I need to actually check on that because I think there's a separate process for
It is.
requesting the showmobile and there may be some insurance requirements.
Just for that and not the
Right.
street
Yeah.
piece. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So just hold off and let me double check.
Okay. Okay.
Tell me how many times neighborhoods actually come to us for a special event permit or a special block party permit that they would, or is it mainly that they call for barricades and we know that's what's going on because of that?
It is Tabitha.
So we would issue about 50 to 60 permits for block parties per calendar year.
Oh, boy. Okay.
And during so it's mainly in the summertime, and then now for Halloween, we're issuing a lot for events.
I can think of at least 4 or 5 that happen on a recurring basis in the annual in the Ardmore neighborhood there. There's one block that, or one street that loves to do a 4th of July event. There's another that has kind of a Labor Day or something. I can't remember exactly when they do it, but they do it on a recurring basis sometime in the summer season. And there are there's a third that likes to do it in the fall, and then there are 2 other blocks that do it around Halloween. Huge Halloween crowds in that neighborhood. You've got a bunch of houses that work to outdo each other on the decorations. People come from counties away to see it. And while that is the neighborhood that I'm most familiar with, the large neighborhood I'm most familiar with, that I know has, sort of very local traditions, I assume that there are similar situations around the city. There are certain neighborhoods that have their own traditions, and I'm interested in our avoiding cutting those off. And thinking, I'm asking myself, is $100 going to be prohibitive for some of those neighborhoods? And I'm afraid that the answer might be yes. Some that could do 50, or actually will say, we can't pass the hat for the extra 50. I don't know. Don't worry about that.
That's, and I truly do wonder how many go on. No one bothers to block the street. It's just all the bodies in the street that block it. So, I know of some that do that. So, at any rate.
With that, in terms of how long has the $300 been in place? Hadn't been that long, has it, or has that been? Because it was changed not too long ago.
That was changed within the past year when we made the revisions to the permitting process. It was at that time that we discovered the barricades that were being used were not authorized official barricades.
And what was the amount before then?
$50.
It was 50 before then?
Mm-hmm.
And so, in that same vein, now since it's gone to $300, how many times does your office get requests for either waivers or for that $300, or council members getting requested to help pay the costs for the $300? speaking out of experience.
Quite often,
Right.
quite often, it's a burden. It's a burden on the neighborhoods, quite frankly, and you see a decline. The 300 is steep for just a normal block party, is what we're seeing. Realize and understand the safety aspect and the need to have some type of barricade for enclosure. It's just the cost is high for some neighborhoods.
I'd throw out for discussion the idea of trying, maybe splitting the difference, trying to do a $75 thing, even if that results in a low level of city subsidy. It's a community building thing, and I think it's worth the modest city subsidy cumulatively on an annual basis to encourage the neighborhoods that have that tradition of, or that want to build that tradition of getting together.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Again, I just, like earlier, would like to know how many groups paid the 300 or whatever the number was before that. And again, I'm not against neighborhoods doing anything, but you got to understand now, there are some neighborhoods, they're not up on all of these block parties and other things that go on, and they look to us as the oversight committee to help monitor this or fashion it in such a way that it promotes engagement. But if we're going from $300 to $100, I don't think that's going to deter people from doing a block party. If people like you and I got calls for the Boston Roundup, if I could help, and I did, but I don't think $100 will stop people. I think in the times that we live in, again, you got to remember things cost. We got a low tax rate. We like to provide a lot of services, and I'm all for that. But eventually, we got to figure out how we balance the incurred costs that we see, such as labor, such as gas, such as, vehicles, such as equipment. There's got to be some balance somewhere. And again, I don't see anything wrong with the $100 if it's been higher all along. I don't think the people will run through the street and have block parties without the barriers or anything. I don't think that'll happen.
I did, frankly. I think the $300 is so prohibitive that I bet they've come to a screeching halt. I doubt if we've had 5 block parties where they paid out of pocket $300 expenses, I'd be shocked. I don't think any of the ones in the Ardmore neighborhood that I'm familiar with have happened this year.
Yes, we've had some that just said they wouldn't do it, and of course others have some choice words for staff. So we try to help out whenever we can.
So I don't think the question is comparing 100 to 300. Clearly, 100 is a lot more affordable than 300. I think the question is, 50 versus 100, and that's why. And I'll make it a motion. I'll move that we direct that for the ones that would be qualified under the proposed policy at 100, that we set that as a $75 fee. If there's a second, there are 3 of us here.
Is there a second? I'll second that. Any other discussion? Then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
Aye.
Okay. 2 to 1. Thank you very much.
Item G3, report on potential Holly Avenue neighborhood rezoning.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. As you recall, we were asked in your first meeting of September to study the potential of this and bring a report back to this committee. You see some representative pictures for the neighborhood core of Holly Avenue there. And most of the neighborhood is currently zoned LO, or limited office. Some parts near the edges of the neighborhood are zoned PB, pedestrian business, or some variation like limited or special use. But most of the neighborhood is currently zoned LO, and it has been zoned a category that allows non-residential uses actually since the 1960s. So when the UDO came into play in 1995, it was changed from R1 to, which allowed the variety of uses there, to LO, which also allowed that. The area that we looked at that appears most feasible, and again, the question that was brought to us is for the core of the neighborhood, is that area that I'm showing in yellow there, and that generally stretches from the alleyway that is between Poplar and Spruce westward to just west of Spring Street, between Spring and Broad, and from roughly 2nd Street and some of the properties on the north side of 2nd Street to south of 1st Street. So that's generally been recognized in all the studies that have been done on Holly Avenue before as the core of the neighborhood. That donut hole that you see in the middle there is actually already zoned a residential district. It's RSQ. But all the rest of that you see in yellow is either LO or some variation of PB. The present LO zoning does not, in our view, encourage long-term residential use because it allows by right all those uses that you see listed there, such as banking, combined use, actually family group home B, since family group home A is already allowed in residential zoning districts, funeral home, government offices, hospice, palliative care, museum art gallery, child daycare center, group care A, veterinary services, and Kendall Indoor. Quite a variety of non-residential uses that if they became fairly pervasive in that area because they are allowed by right, would probably put a chilling effect on the long-term viability of other residential uses. So what would be the policy basis for considering a rezoning? Well, the first thing I'll point to is Legacy 2030. It defines, as you recall, growth management areas, and you recall we have growth management areas 1 through 5, downtown core, urban neighborhoods, suburban neighborhoods. Well, this actually is carved out as part of the urban neighborhood GMA2 growth management area. So it's really, even though it's within that rectangle that's covered by the downtown plan, it's fairly unique in that it is part of a peninsula that comes up from West Salem that is part of growth management area 2 or urban neighborhoods. Also, the downtown plan says that most of the Holly Avenue core is designated for general residential land use rather than mixed use, which is the designation for the rest of the downtown plan area. And it also goes further to say general residential category means the property may be suitable to rezoning to a district that allows present use as single or multifamily residences. We did a little land use study there, sort of a windshield survey of current land uses, and you can see from the colors there that really the majority of uses are single family. Those are in the yellow. The lighter tan are duplex, and then the darker brown are some form of multifamily, and then the pink are offices. So there are only 3 office uses currently in that area, and 5 multifamily. The rest of them are some form of single family or duplex. Historic significance. You all may be aware that Holly Avenue is considered a National Register Historic District, and that recognized the residential origins and the architecture. So that would be another thing to consider as part of that. So after looking at all this, the staff came to the conclusion that the RSQ district, which is the same district that was applied to the West End, appears to be the most feasible residential district to consider. It's roughly 71 properties. It would limit the residential development potential to up to 4 units per building, depending on the lot size. It would require parking to the side or the rear of the structure. It would make the least number of properties in the core legal nonconforming, and that would be the 3 offices and the 5 multifamily. And those properties that are made legal nonconforming could continue as is until they are redeveloped or the use ceases for more than a year. The RSQ district, changing to an RSQ district, would not does allow for the following uses that are not permitted in the current LO district, such as adult daycare home or child daycare small, and then there's several other uses that are allowed either by planning board site plan approval or Board of Adjustment special use permit, and you see those listed there, including churches, parking, off-site parking, schools, child daycare, large home, habilitation facility A, manufactured home class A, or urban agriculture. So those are only allowed with special approvals. When you compare the list of uses that are allowed in LO that aren't allowed in RSQ, they are certainly a whole lot heavier uses than you see here on this list. So the process, if this committee decides to go ahead and request that this be a city-initiated rezoning, would be, of course, the committee would vote to request initiation. The planning staff would then prepare all of our case materials, staff report. We would order zoning signs both in and around the area. We'd send mail notification to property owners and the owners within the 500-foot radius around it to notify them of it. And this is the map that we would talk about. That's that yellow area that I showed you before. Now this time it has zoning as well as the 500-foot radius around it. So you can see the zoning pattern as well as around it, as well as what's in the area. And then beyond that, the extra outreach efforts to property owners would be a neighborhood responsibility. This has been discussed with Councilmember McIntosh, and he's already been working on that. The planning board would then hold a public hearing and make a recommendation, and then the case would go to the full council for public hearing and a final decision. So that's basically our report. That's how it could happen if the committee decides that we should go forward with that.
Thank you, Mr. Norby. I do know that Councilmember McIntosh, as you say, is very much in favor of this, in fact, initiated this request. So are there any questions of Mr. Norby?
Just one. Procedurally, so the committee initiates it, not the full council? We don't make a recommendation to full council?
I think in discussing it with the city attorney, we thought it would be sufficient if the committee requests, because ultimately the council will have to make the final decision anyway.
Yeah, okay.
So it's just a matter of directing staff to go ahead and prepare and take it through the process, but it will come before council eventually. The public hearing will.
You all typically ask us to initiate a UDO text amendment, for example. Mm-hmm. So that would be kind of similar.
Yeah. Phil, did you want to speak to this?
Thank you, council members. I'm Phil Archer, and I'm a homeowner in the Holly Avenue neighborhood, and I'm on the board of the Holly Avenue Neighborhood Association. We've met probably 4 times about this rezoning idea, and so far everybody that's been attending is unanimously in support of this. Councilmember McIntosh discovered that since the 80s, only 2 properties have turned from residential to office, and one of them has already turned back to residential. And of the 3 offices that are in the neighborhood, 2 are Catholic charities. And the other one, I'm not quite sure who that is, but so they're my next door neighbors, and I've asked them whether this would cause any alarms. But since they're grandfathered in already, the feeling is generally that property values go up if residential character is maintained. And law offices, small daycare sorts of things could still happen if people are living in the house. So there's not concern. Where there's concern is things like a crematorium that's been being developed on the perimeter of this core that we're talking about, which really would affect people's livability.
Okay. Any questions of Phil? Okay, thanks.
Just commenting, I know we'll have opportunity to discuss when things come back around, and to the neighborhood association, and we're always, and at least for myself, always grateful for participation and engagement from neighborhood and neighborhood associations and communities. And Councilmember McIntosh has shared the conversation of what's been taking place in that neighborhood. One challenge I do have with these type of proceedings, and I know there's discussion about other opportunities of doing certain things. Sometimes I'm challenged when we look at these is when individuals have already made certain investments and then they get barred at a later date to do certain things within certain properties. Sometimes that causes some personal anxiety in terms of how that works. But at the end of the day, when we look at neighborhoods, I think that the majority of neighborhoods should have very much influence in terms of what they like to see happening in their communities.
That's very good. And in fact, as was indicated, there really has not been a great changeover to business uses, commercial uses. So, may I have the decision of the committee? Just, yeah.
I support it. The council member wants it. The neighborhood wants it. I'm in favor of it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, then we'll say let's go with it, and it'll come back around.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Norby. Is there anything else that anyone needs to bring up before the committee? Yes, ma'am.
I still believe, Madam Chair, we need to look at a couple of things. Signs. And with the political climate coming, the cycle coming, filing dates are December the 1st through the 21st. After that time, or during that time, we're going to see even more signs than we've ever seen because everybody is on the ballot, along with all of the signs that are non-compliant that we have out there now. Again, I don't know what it is in our ordinance about these flags that people plant everywhere. If I got a new business or I want to sell more, whatever it is, I just go get a flag made and I come back and I stick it in the ground and it's just waving, those long poles. Again, I think we need to go back. I think we need to do some kind of audit, sampling, inspection as to how, even if we need to call up other cities and benchmark them, Winston has got to get a handle on this. So we're just, now everything that we work so hard to do, our city's looking like trash from all these paper signs, as Councilmember Bessie say, what is it, on litter on a stick. I want to see us do something about that, Madam Chair. I am seriously, with December coming and the holidays, we will look like a paper-mache decorated city with all kinds of things. I also want us to look at, again, some type of, we can talk about how we need to do this. And I'm not calling out our inspections department or anything, but we need to start auditing, again, some of these departments that sometimes we as council members get calls on that they weren't happy or something didn't transpire the way it's supposed to or whatever the process is. I think we need to look at that as we move forward. Those are my two things.
Very good. So, anything else we need to? Okay. All right. If not, then meeting is adjourned.